The movie opens up in a church, where a young girl named Sarah and her family hear a pastor saying God can even move mountains if the faith is strong. In the next scene, Sarah goes to watch her brother Danny's football match with her parents. Danny's girlfriend Cindy also joins them. Although Danny's playing well, the opposing team's player Bronner dives inside the penalty box and earns Danny a yellow card. As a result, a penalty is awarded and Bronner scores it with authority, hence winning the match for his team. After the match, everyone goes over to Sarah's grandfather Sam's place to spend the weekend. Shortly after, the kids hike to a nearby lake for fishing. When Sarah finds a dead bird on the shore, she decides to heal it with her prayers. Danny tries to convince her that she can't bring the dead back to life. However, the little girl is adamant that it will work. Soon, Danny and his girlfriend go fishing while little Sarah stays behind and prays for the bird. An hour later, the two return, only to find Sarah still praying on her knees. Surprisingly, she mentions that she can see God floating in over the lake. Suddenly, the wind blows for a moment and the bird comes back to life. As it flies, Cindy and Danny are speechless. However, they're skeptical that Sarah brought the bird back to life. They assume it must be the wind that woke up the bird. After returning from the lake, Sarah tells her grandfather about the bird. She explains that she saw God standing on the other side of the lake and the bird flapped its wings, so she let it go. Sam, who's very fond of his granddaughter, says he believes her because he always thought Sarah was special. Later that night, after returning home, Sarah calls her best friend Mark, who is wheelchair-bound because of a spinal injury. She tells him about the miracle, but as expected, Mark doesn't buy it. However, when Sarah promises on the Bible, he eventually believes her. After a while, Sarah's mother comes to her room and asks her to think of all the things that she's grateful for that day before sleeping. Surprisingly, the little girl mentions that God will take her to heaven soon, worrying her mother. A few hours later, Danny wakes up his parents, asking them to check on Sarah because she's gotten sick. Thankfully, their family physician, Dr. Ben, arrives immediately. As Sarah's symptoms include high fever and nausea, Ben concludes she has a stomach flu and will be fine in a couple of days. After Ben departs, Sarah's father goes to her room and finds an incredible painting. It's a painting of God that Sarah saw on the lake. 2 days later, Sarah and Mark are returning home from school. On their way, some guys bully Sarah, asking her to bring their dead animals back to life and calling her pathetic. Turns out that Mark revealed the miracle to others because he was excited for his best friend. Meanwhile, Danny and Cindy, who are passing by the street, see the boys troubling Sarah. As a result, Danny trips the boys with his football and sends them away. Just then, Bronner arrives with his dog and provokes Danny for a fight by mocking him for his previous game. At the same time, a car also arrives at a high speed and hits Bronner's dog, killing it instantly. While Bronner cries over his dead dog, Sarah steps in and prays for it. Surprisingly, the dog comes back to life and plays with her. Everyone watching the miracle is taken aback. Mark, who's also present among the attendees, requests Sarah to cure him of his spinal injury. Although she isn't sure if it'll work, Sarah prays for him and asks God to help her friend walk again. The following morning, Mark's parents take him to the hospital to see Dr. Ben. Turns out Mark has been able to move his toes, which was completely impossible after his spinal cord injury. Surprised, the doctor asks him to move again, and Mark successfully does it. Although Ben is stunned, he asks Mark's mother to not have high hopes. Suddenly, Mark is able to stand on his feet and walk. Even after going through such a deadly and incurable injury, the doctors can't believe that Mark is able to walk again. As he walks, Mark is overjoyed and gives the credit to Sarah for healing him. He also mentions Bronner's dog. Meanwhile, a media person, Dolores, who's at the hospital for a checkup, hears Mark and decides to cover the story. And in no time, Sarah is all over the news. In the next scene, Ben and the pastor visit Sarah at her house. When they tell her about Mark, she jumps with joy and thanks God for listening to her prayers. The pastor asks her about the lake incident, and she describes everything to him. However, Ben isn't convinced and asks Sarah's parents to bring her to the hospital for some examinations. On the other hand, the pastor believes there has to be something special with the girl, as the doctors have no logical explanation for Mark's recovery. Also, he knows that Sarah would never outright lie. Afterwards, Sarah's father goes to her room to find her drawing a girl riding on a horse. When asked, she says the girl came to her dreams and thinks she wants to be friends with her. Turns out the girl is a cancer patient named Teresa who is very fond of horses. She's scared of dying because her cancer is getting worse. Therefore, Teresa's mother, who has learned about Sarah from the news, wants to take her daughter to her to be healed. The following day, many parents arrive with their diseased and disabled children outside Sarah's house to be cured. When Sarah's parents decide to send those people away, a kind Sarah asks them what they would do if she was sick and there was a possibility to help her with such miracles. Her parents fear because if she goes out and heals all those people, she will never get a chance to be a little girl anymore, because more people will come over and it will never stop. However, Sarah doesn't listen and goes outside. She notices Teresa and immediately remembers her from her dreams. Then she walks to her and holds her hand before praying. As soon as she completes her prayers, Teresa starts feeling better, as if she's been cured. Eventually, Sarah heals a blind girl, a crippled boy, and every other person waiting there to be cured. However, as she's about to get inside the house, she collapses of exhaustion. Wasting no time, her parents take her to Ben's clinic, where he runs some blood tests and schedules her for an MRI. Sarah's mother tells Ben that after she prayed for Mark, she couldn't get out of bed all day, and now after healing so many people at once, she got exhausted and collapsed. She can't believe how such miracles are possible. Just then, Ben and Sarah's parents are interrupted when a staff summons them outside where the media people have surrounded the hospital. Every news channel is broadcasting Sarah and calling her a miracle worker. In order to avoid the media, Ben asks Sarah's parents to stay at Sam's house for a couple of days after her MRI. Thus, they sneak her out from the back door and take Sarah to her grandfather's house. At Sam's place, Sarah's mother reveals everything that happened earlier. She's still stunned after she saw Sarah miraculously curing the people. However, she also worries because ever since Sarah said she saw God, she's getting sicker every day. Just then, she gets a call from the doctor and bursts into tears. In the next scene, Sam goes to the same lake where Sarah claims to have seen God. There, he begs God to cure his granddaughter. He cries asking God why he would make Sarah so perfect and then snatch her away from them. The following day, Ben and the pastor arrive at Sam's house to talk about Sarah. They send the little girl outside, but she comes back and eavesdrops on the conversation. Soon, the doctor reveals that Sarah has an inoperable brain tumor which might have been causing her hallucinations of God. When Sarah's mother inquires about all those she's cured, the doctor replies that it was some kind of mass hypnosis. Sarah, who's been overhearing everything, is devastated when Ben tells her parents that she's going to die soon and there's no cure. As Sarah's mother breaks down, Sarah approaches her and asks her not to cry. The little girl tries to comfort her mother, saying she'll be with a safe and happy God when she goes to heaven. However, she wants to go back to the lake and ask God if he can delay her departure for a few years. As Sarah keeps on insisting, she gets dizzy and falls on the ground. Hence, the parents rush her to the hospital. Later, after the little girl regains consciousness, Danny and Cindy leave the hospital and arrive at Sam's, where they find Teresa, Mark, their parents, and the pastor. Teresa tells everyone that when Sarah healed her last week, she saw a spiritual figure floating next to Sarah, holding out his hand to touch the children she was touching. After she prayed for her, Teresa felt different and warm for the first time in years. She felt healthy and knew right away that she had been cured. Since Sarah wanted to help people, Teresa believes it's time to pay her back and help her. After Teresa finishes speaking, Sam reveals that he and the pastor have a plan to fulfill Sarah's last wish to go to the lake. Although doing so will make Sarah's parents, Dr. Ben, and everybody at the hospital unhappy, Sam wants to do it for his granddaughter. It's because the old man believes that the lake has magical powers. He is certain that Sarah knows something that no one else knows which could help her. Hearing this, everyone agrees to help Sarah get to the lake. Later that night, the group puts on a collective effort and tricks the hospital staff, Sarah's parents, and even Dr. Ben to get the little girl out of the hospital. Once Danny and Teresa's mother get into their car with Sarah, they're followed by Mark and Cindy. As soon as Sam gets a text from his grandson, he also rushes to his car accompanied by the pastor. Unfortunately, a media reporter sees Sarah inside the car and informs others. Inside the hospital, Sarah's parents are shocked to see Teresa instead of their daughter and realize that Sam has taken her to the lake. Thus, they too start their car and drive away. Elsewhere, some officers start following Danny and Sam due to them crossing the speed limit. Danny somehow manages to lose the police. But unfortunately, a tree falls and blocks the road. With the storm and heavy rainfall, Danny can't carry his sister all the way to the lake. Just then, Bronner comes to the rescue and offers to help. He mentions that he knows a shortcut and carries Sarah with him, as he owes her for saving his dog. Danny and Bronner carry the little girl in turns and make their way to the lake. On the way, a wolf snarls at them, but Bronner's dog sends it away. Soon, Danny and Bronner arrive at the lake with Sarah, and the former starts praying on behalf of his sister. Just then, Sarah's parents, the media, and several other people also arrive. Sarah's mother yells at Sam for bringing her daughter there on such a stormy and rainy night. Sadly, amidst the commotion, Sarah passes away, leaving everyone devastated. Suddenly, a bright light swirls over the lake and God appears. Then, Sarah's soul departs from her body and goes to God. Everyone is taken aback by what they just saw. Although they're devastated to see Sarah die, they're also somewhat relieved to see her holding God's hand. Following that, they take Sarah's body home and lay her down in the bed. Danny finds Sarah's drawing where she's holding God's hand and shows it to everyone. They realize that the little girl knew God was coming for her. Shortly after, Danny finds another drawing in which Sarah is coming back from heaven. Seeing this, everyone becomes hopeful and Danny starts praying with all his heart. His prayers are eventually answered as Sarah gasps and suddenly comes back to life. She explains that she told God she wasn't ready to be in heaven yet, so he sent her back to take care of her family. Dr. Ben, who witnessed everything unfold right in front of his eyes, finally starts believing in God's miracles. Afterwards, Sarah goes outside and surprises the people who were lighting candles after her death. Considering her as God's child, everyone kneels down. However, Sarah asks them to get up. She mentions that all must have faith in God and pray to Him so that He'll help them. Not only that, she asks everyone to love their children and families, try to help one another, and spread love. God will definitely help them because He loves everyone. The movie ends as the whole town visits the church and listens to the pastor with complete faith in God.